If you've been paying attention, today we learned that Daredevil is now stopping production. I mean, it's already stopped because they're all the actors are still on strike, but they're rebooting, kind of retooling the show. They're going to take some of the stuff they've already filmed and then use that. But for the most part, something happened. It is going to be a different show. There were certain things that apparently the producers didn't like about what they were doing, and I don't know what direction they're going to go in the future, but, this is pretty big. This is pretty significant. And the article that described this also talked about some other kind of recent failures and how Marvel has been making TV shows and how they're thinking about changing it. I think it's true to say that Quantumania and Secret Invasion, the two that came out this year, are two of the worst things Marvel's produced, and then on the other hand, I think Guardians 3, and we'll see about Loki, but Loki so far, assuming it stays at this level of quality that it's at now, potentially two of the best things Marvel has produced. So we're in a weird time. I do want to talk kind of specifics about the article. So this was reported by The Hollywood Reporter. They love to report things, and it came from a writer named Boris Kitt. And basically, this is I'll read the log line here. It was Daredevil hits reset button as Marvel overhauls its TV business. Launched during the pandemic with a playbook to shoot 150 million plus seasons with no pilots, the Disney unit is undergoing growing pains and seeing the logic of traditional TV culture. So for people that don't know, we're getting a Daredevil show. It was called Daredevil Born Again, which is hilarious in these circumstances. They had started shooting it. There were some pictures. We've had some, I wouldn't say even plot leaks, but maybe some of them are leaks, but a lot of kind of speculation about what characters are going to be in it, what actors are and are not going to be in it, and what storylines the show is going to follow. I really don't think too many of those have been confirmed by this. I'll say two storylines about this show have come out today. One I won't get into because it might be spoilery, but two will definitely be in the trailers. Wilson Fisk is either running for or already the mayor of New York City, and part of this season is going to be a crackdown on superhumans, kind of like what happened in the comics not too long ago. And it makes sense because Daredevil not only is a street level hero, he hates the Kingpin, but also now he knows Spider-Man, he knows Punisher, he knows Jessica Jones. So he can connect a lot of these street level Marvel characters together in a way that would have been tricky before, especially with the Spider-Man connection. So they halted production because of the strike, and apparently they started putting together some of the episodes, showing them to Kevin Feige and the other producers, and the other producers were like, we don't like this. One of the complaints that I heard that is in this article that I think is fascinating, that apparently this quote's from the article. Sources say that Corman and Ord, these were the new writers of Daredevil, crafted a legal procedural that did not resemble the Netflix version, known for its action and violence. Cox didn't even show up in costume until the 4th episode. Marvel, after greenlighting the concept, found itself needing to rethink the original intention of the show. So that's pretty specific, right? That's them saying, we didn't like the genre that the show ended up being, which I cannot imagine was not in the script, right? And this is supposed to be very long. I think this series is 18 episodes. I don't know if it's going to be multiple seasons or what they're planning on doing, maybe cutting it up 9 and 9. But the idea is that there were going to be 18 episodes. It wasn't until the 4th episode that he put on the Daredevil costume. I imagine that was in the script though. That first 3 episodes, Kevin Feige and them were reading it oh, this is great. This is wonderful. I thought something missing. I just can't put my finger on what. And then they got to the 4th one. They were oh, that's what it was. I do think that that's a thing that they kind of land on there, is this difference in tone between Daredevil season 4, let's call it Born Again, just that one, and the previous 3 seasons, because they were violent and there were lots of fight scenes and there was a solid amount of Daredevil fighting guys in it. I do think that I don't think that fully misses the point, but I do think that what makes Daredevil fun is not just the fighting. I think the fighting is good, and I think that's what made it stand out originally because of that one, really excellent long take action sequence in, I think, episode 2. But I would say it's interesting because a lot of the Disney Plus shows that have succeeded have done so without that many action scenes, right? The 2 best ones, I would say the 2 most positively reviewed, Loki, not action heavy. There's some chase sequences and stuff like that in the first episode or 2, but it is not like Falcon and the Winter Soldier or Moon Knight, where there are really big action sequences that are the focus of each episode. And then on the other side, you got WandaVision, which I don't think has a big action sequence until maybe episode 5. And even that I don't think would really, there's some, there's lots of effects going on and there's some implied action, but in terms of a fight. I don't think we see that until the very end. And there are some like moments, like there's the bit with the drone where she comes out. But yeah, that's like very late in the game. So I think it's interesting that they're like, this show did too much law procedural and not enough fighting. And the two shows that I think have been the most successful of Marvel's have been the two that stuck most to the subgenre that they're trying to fit into, like the sitcom thingy, whatever you would call WandaVision, and then the kind of Doctor Who mystery adventure thing that Loki was becoming. So I think it's kind of a strange criticism in that way. I also think him not putting on the costume is fine in a world where Daredevil season 3 does not end with him kind of going, oh, everything's kind of good now. And his introduction in She-Hulk isn't just him in a costume fighting crime. Like, it seems like what they were going to do, maybe, was start with him having hung up the Daredevil costume again, which I think would make that like the third time this has happened in universe. Like, he does it a lot. So I'm not incredibly like sold on that as an idea. I understand why that makes sense to establish a very big threat first and then pull Matt back into this world. But on the other hand, it's like, I don't know, man, it seems like you like being Daredevil. You should probably just be Daredevil. You were just Daredevil in California the other day. So I don't know why you're not doing it here. But a lot of the focus of this article was not on the Daredevil show. A lot of that is probably because it's still pretty, like a lot of that information is pretty tight, and we don't really know what the end result of that is. We don't know, how much things are going to be changed, who's going to come on. Are they going to just take season 4 pretty much and like take everybody from the first 3 seasons of Daredevil that they can get and just bring them on? And I understand why that's like a reaction people have, is because they like that. So it's like, bring those guys back. On the other hand, like, I don't know if trying to fully recapture that magic is a great idea, just because it's like there's a good chance you can't be as good as Daredevil season 3. Like, Daredevil season 3 was nearly perfect. So if you can't do that, I do think maybe going in a different direction, like doing a procedural or something like that, or making it a little sillier or something like that could work. Like, Daredevil as a character is not always written one way. There are a bunch of different kind of phases. I don't want to say phases, but you can write all of it. Pretty much every character in comics that you like has been written in different books in different ways. Wolverine is sometimes very serious and like lone samurai warrior, whatever. And sometimes he's kind of a jokey teacher who, puts his face in his hand and goes, oh, these kids. I think the idea of maybe changing midstream, going from like Daredevil season 2 on Netflix to Daredevil season 3 in Netflix, and then switching the tone of the show, making it a little campier, I don't think that would work. But I do think this as a fresh start for Daredevil would have been fine, in my opinion. And in fact, I think one of the things that people complain about in She-Hulk, a show I really liked, and a show that did seem like it knew exactly what it was doing, people didn't like that it wasn't more focused on the law stuff. Like, not only did she not really, focus on individual cases that much, besides just being like a kind of avenue to introduce new characters, the law stuff didn't really make very much sense, which I think is fine because it's a comedy in a superhero world and, it's not taking itself incredibly seriously. But on the other hand, if that is what you want, this is where you do it. You do it in Daredevil. So I guess what I'm saying is there's nothing about what I've heard about Daredevil season 4 so far that makes me go, oh, I'm actually glad they changed it. There's one thing with returning characters, which I don't want to get into because, again, I think it might be a spoiler. Then I'm like, I do not love the way they seems like they were going to do that. But A, I don't think I've seen that confirmed. And B, like they might not change that. Like, that might be something that they're just doing the way they're doing it. So anyway, but the more important part of the article, I think the more illuminating part of the article came in the sense of like what Marvel is planning to do, what they're going to change, and also an example of some of the failures, the big one being Secret Invasion, which, man, thinking about that show, it came out like a month and a half, and it feels like it came out 10 years ago. It's wild. And I have a video on Nebula right now. It'll be on YouTube eventually. It's my Secret Invasion rewrite, and I think it's quite good. But it just shows like at one point in the rewrite, like in the video, I go into like, it's really weird some of these decisions they made. Like, it's wild in 2023 that they did a show about the refugees, and the bad guy was one of the refugees who wanted to infiltrate the government and do bad guy stuff. Like, it just feels so tone deaf. In a world where the Skrulls have been evil the whole time, I'd still be like, I don't think that's a great idea. But in a world like Captain Marvel, where they have been established to be sympathetic refugees and victims of space xenophobia, I just, it's not good. And I think a lot of the things about that show didn't work. And apparently that show was reshot a lot. And again, some of these shows that have been reshot a lot, you can tell COVID is involved, but I don't think COVID was involved so much that some of the decisions on the show were the only decisions they could make, right? Like, I don't think COVID is why Gravik is the bad guy. And I don't think COVID is why, like, Nick Fury doesn't take any accountability during the season and, like, some of the bigger story problems. You can see scenes that didn't make it into the final cut that are in the trailer, so it's a little easier to tell kind of certain things that would have been different, but I really can't tell what the full first season, like the first draft of this would have looked like. I'd love to read it. But one of the things that they said, and they talk about this in terms of She-Hulk and Moon Knight, is a lot of the times Marvel will let go of creatives, so like writers or producers, and then that will very dramatically change what the show is and like how it's working. So like Moon Knight did that. She-Hulk, they got rid of, I believe, the head writer, and then they ended up bringing her back. And She-Hulk was apparently an example of a show that did have kind of a through line. That was something that Marvel really appreciated, which I do think is quite strange that they don't have those in all of them. They were saying like, oh yeah, we're going to focus on showrunners and having show Bibles and things that like every big show has. Also, I think it's wild that they are saying now that like they want to continue doing multi-season shows instead of these kind of like we don't really know. I mean, there's not going to be another season of WandaVision, and there's probably not going to be another season of like Captain Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So like the idea of these kind of one-off 6 to 10 episode seasons with a story that is kind of started and ended and is not expected to continue. That is interesting to me that Marvel doesn't like that, because I think sometimes it really works and I think sometimes it doesn't, but I don't think that's as much to do with the format, like the actual presentation, as opposed to just like, I don't think the writing fully comes together on some of them and it doesn't, really work. It's so funny to me. One of the things I thought was hilarious is how much Secret Invasion behind the scenes is a more interesting version of Secret Invasion, the show, because it is like factions fighting for control and undermining each other in this big political struggle within this writer's room. And in the show, it's just people trying to shoot each other. But so that's not great. I guess the big question is like, is this a good thing? Is this move a good thing? Marvel acknowledging, some of these faults, changing them. It's definitely not the best option. The best option is Daredevil is good, and the reports are that it's very successful and popular and everybody's gonna like it and they don't have to reshoot it. However, assuming that's not the option, we have like 3 other options. 1, mediocre Daredevil, it's not very good. They don't really change anything because they think it's okay and they release it and people don't really like it. 2, it's bad and they release it, and then that's like the worst option. And then 3, this one, they change gears midstream and then maybe it is able to be great. But assuming it actually wasn't great, this is our best option, I think. I think part of the question is how genuine is Marvel at this moment with what they're saying about how they're going to make changes in the future. Because a move like this could be a great thing where they're like, well, listen, we made mistakes. We know this isn't good, and we are going to like really structurally rethink how we're making these TV shows, make them more like TV shows with pilots and showrunners and all that. Or they could know that's what they're supposed to say, and they know that they're going to get in trouble for this Daredevil thing. So they could make it seem like this big, oh, we're really taking this seriously, you guys. Like, we're Domino's. We know the pizza was bad before, but it's going to be good now. And then in a year, we're still having this problem because they didn't make those structural changes. They just wanted some cover for this Daredevil thing. Like, I could see a world where that's true. I don't fully blame Marvel, too, because like one of the things that they've said in this interview that I think came up a couple times is that a lot of the writers and people that were working on the shows were kind of upset because the show would, they'd rewrite the show on the day, and like they'd make a lot of these big changes as the show is going on. And I think if you look at some of these shows, especially the ones that were not good, like Secret Invasion, and you go like, why? What were they thinking? Like, that's such a bad, of course that's going to fail. And I think we forget, and I can't wait because there's a new a book about the MCU out. I'm going to probably read that, maybe even do like a little book club thing for it, like I did with the Ant-Man video. The fact that like, historically, this mega franchise was started with an Iron Man movie that did not, I believe, have a script that they were shooting with from day one. Like, that they did improvise a lot of it. A lot of the character relationships, the quippiness, the things that Marvel's become famous for are things that happened because they were very free with what they were doing. And part of that is like low expectations, but also it's like that isn't what you're seeing in other studios. Like, for example, one of my favorite scenes in the MCU is the Justin Hammer weapons demonstration. And that, I mean, it's super well put together. And you look at that and you go, well, obviously that was in the script. And it wasn't. They were feeding lines to Sam Rockwell through an earpiece that they were writing on set at that moment. Like, that is how seat of their pants they were flying on this. And I think sometimes it really works. I also think some of the bigger rewrites and like changes they do during the process seem to work, right? Like, again, a lot of the times with like Secret Invasion and Quantumania and stuff, you can tell there's changes and it makes it look like changes like that are always bad. But movies I think most people like Infinity War, like they didn't know in the end that Hulk was going to be in the Hulkbuster suit. Originally the plan was he was going to turn into Smart Hulk and there was going to be a scene where he did that and then he was going to go punch Thanos, I guess, or whatever. But it was going to be like that moment from the trailer. But then you see it in the version that gets released in theaters completely different because at some point they decided it just didn't work. The flow, I believe, is what they said, like it kind of interrupted the action in a way that, you know, maybe it's true, but I guess it just proves that this is not always a failing proposition. So I understand why Marvel thinks this works. Like, I do think TV, because it's just more time, like you're filming, you know, say 10 45-minute long episodes. So for instance, for Daredevil, let's say it's 18 45-minute long episodes. That means this show in total would have been like 13 hours long, as opposed to, let's say, a Daredevil movie, which would be 2 hours long. So like making rewrites, making changes, especially ones that will affect things that happen later in the movie, you have so much more freedom. It's not the same kind of thing because you don't have to think about all the ripples that a change like that will create and how that will affect the tone. It just is not as complicated. Obviously, it's still very complicated and they're not always perfect when it comes to this kind of stuff, but like it's a different ball game. So in general, if they're being genuine about this, if this is actually a change they're making, I think it's good. I also think we've learned a lot in the last couple of years about streaming and what success looks like on streaming, and I still don't know what that is. Like, there's metrics that come out and stuff, but in general, what does a popular streaming show, like what is their goal? A bazillion viewers, sell a bazillion toys, get lots of new subscribers? Because like, I fully get DC moving Blue Beetle off of streaming, and I even get them canceling Batgirl, and I don't like that. Like, I would have liked to see that movie, but I understand this question of like, we're gonna spend $100 million on this thing that you would normally put in theaters and make money off of very directly, but instead now we're just gonna like do it and then hope it maybe makes money. Like, why are we focusing on that? I do think I would be fine with Marvel scaling back on the TV a lot and spending more of its effort on movies, but you know, I think 2 and 2 a year, 3 and 3 a year, anything more than that I think is a little much. But I think like 3 and 3 is doable. So, you know, as a Daredevil fan, I'm not psyched that this is going to take longer to make. I hope the new version is good, but I think as a fan of Marvel, as someone that wants these movies and shows to be good, I think this is okay. Like, yeah, we've been in worse positions before, and I do think Loki currently existing and being more or less good is a good thing. Like, I think that is solid, but you know, I'm curious to see how DC does this differently, because they're also doing TV shows, and if they do really give the showrunners freedom, the showrunners that aren't James Gunn, but like the other ones, then Marvel will have a template to kind of look at, and they'll say, oh wow, we actually should have been doing it like this, because up until now nobody really has been that successful at this. Even within Marvel and Disney, like Lucasfilm, some of these other guys have also been kind of all over the place. So yeah, that's all I got. Thank you for watching and listening. Subscribe to Mostly Nitpicking, my podcast, and my other channel, Nando V Movies. And yeah, I'll see you guys soon. Also, if you're going to Comic-Con, come say hi. I will be there in New York on Friday and Saturday. So goodbye, everybody.